My wife said she deserved everything I owned, but the judge thought otherwise. When she first uttered those words, it felt like a knife to my chest. I had shared my life, my dreams, and my home with her, and now she was demanding to strip me of all of it. I wasn't just shocked, I was furious. And for a moment, I couldn't even recognize the woman I had once loved. My name is Ethan, and I am 36 years old. Until recently, I believed I had built a solid marriage. I worked hard to provide for us, building up savings, paying off our house, and planning a future together. But the moment divorce was mentioned, everything changed. Suddenly, it wasn't about love or closure. It was about money, possessions, and who would walk away with more. The first time she said it, we were sitting across from each other in the living room. The tension was unbearable. She looked me straight in the eye and declared, "I deserve everything you own. You wouldn't have any of it without me." I remember my hands clenching in a fist as I fought to keep calm. "Everything I own?" I repeated. "You mean the house I bought before we were married? The savings account I built from working late nights? You think that all belongs to you now?" Her expression was cold, unflinching. "Yes, I gave you my best years. I supported you while you chased your career. That means half isn't enough. I want it all." That night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized the woman who had once been my partner was now preparing to become my enemy. And if she truly wanted everything, then I had no choice but to fight for what was rightfully mine. The papers arrived on a Monday morning. A thick envelope slid under my apartment door, its weight heavier than it should have been. Inside was the divorce petition, page after page of claims, demands, and accusations. Reading through it, I felt my blood pressure rise. She wasn't just asking for half. She was demanding full ownership of the house, complete control of our joint savings, and even part of my retirement fund that I had been building long before we even met. On top of that, she wanted monthly spousal support. It was greed wrapped in legal language that I sat at the kitchen table with the document spread out, my hands trembling. Every line painted me as the villain, a cold, ungrateful husband who owed her everything for the years we spent together. She even wrote that I had emotionally abandoned her, a blatant lie designed to win sympathy. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Collins, a sharp man in his early 50s who didn't waste words. He skimmed through the petition, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. Finally, he looked up at me. "She's going for blood," he said flatly. "She's not just asking for a fair split. She's trying to take you for everything you've got." I swallowed hard. Can she actually win this? He leaned back in his chair. "Not if we fight smart. The judge will look at the facts, not just the accusations. But you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly." Ugly didn't even begin to describe it, because 2 days later, I learned she had already moved into the house we once shared, redecorating and presenting it as if she had built it all herself. Neighbors who once greeted me warmly now looked at me with suspicion, no doubt fed by her version of the story. I could see was clear. She wasn't just fighting for property. She was fighting to ruin my reputation, to paint me as nothing more than a man she had carried on her back. And I knew then that the courtroom would become the battlefield where everything I had worked for, and everything I still was, would be put to the test. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and old wood, and the air was heavy with tension as I walked through the double doors. My lawyer, Mr. Collins, stayed calm as always, but I could feel my pulse hammering in my temples. Across the room, my wife sat with her attorney, dressed in a sharp suit, her expression smug and confident. She didn't even look nervous. When the judge entered, silence swept the room. The first hearing was supposed to be procedural, but the moment her lawyer stood up, I realized they had come ready to attack. "Your Honor," he began, "my client sacrificed her career and independence to support her husband. She gave him the best years of her life, enabling him to build his wealth and success. Now, after abandoning her emotionally and financially, he wishes to deny her what she rightfully deserves, everything." I clenched my fists under the table. Abandoning her? Financially? I had never missed a bill, never left her without comfort. But in a courtroom, perception was as dangerous as fact. Then it was our turn. Mr. Collins rose, adjusting his glasses before speaking with calm authority. "Your Honor, The facts will show otherwise. My client purchased the house years before this marriage. He built his retirement savings long before their wedding. And as for emotional abandonment, there will be evidence to prove that the breakdown of this marriage was not due to neglect, but rather to unreasonable demands. The judge listened carefully, scribbling notes, his face unreadable. My stomach twisted with every word spoken. Then came the moment I didn't expect. The judge interrupted. Mrs. Thompson, is it true that you have been living exclusively in the marital home since the separation, while your husband has been forced to find alternative housing? Her attorney hesitated, but she nodded. Yes, but the judge raised a hand. Noted. Until further review, the house will remain in shared possession. Neither party has full claim at this stage. It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. For the first time, I saw her mask crack ever so slightly. Her plan to seize the house outright had been stalled. Yes, we left the courtroom. She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. I knew what that look meant. This was only the beginning. The legal fight was bad enough, but what came next cut even deeper. It wasn't just about papers and hearings anymore. It was about reputation. Within days of the first hearing, I noticed a shift. Friends who used to call me stopped answering. Neighbors who once waved from across the street now avoided eye contact. At first, I thought it was coincidence, until I overheard two women outside the grocery store whispering about me. He left her with nothing, one said. Can you imagine? After all she did for him. That was when it hit me. She wasn't just fighting me in court. She was poisoning my name outside it, that I confronted her about it when I picked up some of my remaining belongings from the house. She was sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee like she hadn't just lit a fire under my life. You're spreading lies, I said, my voice low but sharp. She didn't even blink. I'm telling people the truth as I see it. You always cared more about your career than me. Now, they finally know. You're trying to ruin me. I snapped. She set her mug down, smiling faintly. No, Ethan. I'm just making sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. And when the judge sees how isolated you've become, it'll only prove my point. Her words chilled me. She wasn't just after property or money. She was after my dignity, my standing in the community. That night, I called Mr. Collins. He listened quietly before saying, let her talk. Gossip won't win her the case. Evidence will. He was right, but it didn't make the whispers sting any less. I felt like I was living under a dark cloud, every glance from a neighbor loaded with judgment. Still, deep down, I knew I had one thing she didn't: facts. And facts, sooner or later, had a way of cutting through lies. But before that could happen, I'd have to endure her next move. And something told me it was going to be her most ruthless play yet. The second hearing felt different from the first. My gut told me she was planning something, and I was right. As soon as her lawyer stood, he carried a thick folder like it contained the final nail in my coffin. Your Honor, he began, we submit into evidence a series of text messages and emails showing my client's husband to be dismissive, cruel, and emotionally abusive throughout their marriage. These clearly establish a pattern of neglect and support her claim to a greater share of the marital estate. My chest tightened as he handed the documents to the judge. I leaned toward Mr. Collins, whispering harshly, what is this? I've never written anything like that. He frowned, flipping through the copies. His eyes narrowed. These don't look authentic. When the judge began reading aloud, my blood ran cold. Words supposedly written by me, statements like, you'll never survive without me, and everything you have is because of me, and I can take it away. It was vile, manipulative language, the kind of thing that could destroy a man's credibility in an instant. I stood, unable to hold back. Your Honor, I never wrote those messages. They're fabricated. The judge silenced me with a raised hand. You'll have your turn, Mr. Thompson. My wife sat there, lips curled in a subtle smile, as though she had already won. But then Collins rose to speak. Calm, steady, precise. Your Honor, we question the authenticity of these documents. We have reason to believe they were created after the separation. And if granted time, we will bring in a digital forensics expert to verify the metadata. The judge nodded slowly, clearly skeptical of the sudden evidence. Very well. The authenticity of these messages will be reviewed. Until then, their weight in this case is limited. For the first time that day, I could breathe again. She had tried to bury me under forged evidence, and she almost succeeded. As we left the courtroom, she brushed past me, her voice low and venomous. Enjoy your little victory. It won't last. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. If she was willing to fake evidence, then there was no line she wouldn't cross. The war was far from over. 2 weeks later, the results from the digital forensics expert came in. I sat in Mr. Collins's office, my leg bouncing under the table as he flipped through the report. Finally, he looked up at me with a rare, thin smile. She overplayed her hand, he said. These so-called messages were created after the separation. The metadata shows the timestamps don't line up with the phone records. Some are even written from a different device entirely. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by anger. She hadn't just lied. She had forged evidence to destroy me. The next hearing was different. When Collins presented the forensic findings to the judge, the room shifted. The judge's eyes narrowed as he examined the documents, then turned sharply toward my wife. Mrs. Thompson, he said sternly, do you understand that presenting falsified evidence is a serious matter? This court does not tolerate deception. Her lawyer tried to object, stumbling over his words, but the damage was done. The judge set the documents aside with visible disgust. For the first time, the confidence drained from her face. She sat stiffly, jaw tight, eyes locked on the table as if avoiding my gaze would somehow undo what had just happened. When the session ended, I walked out of the courtroom with my head high. Neighbors and friends might have believed her whispers, but here, in front of the law, her lies had been exposed. Outside the courthouse, she finally looked at me, her eyes burning with fury. This isn't over, she hissed. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I actually believed it might be, because now the judge had seen who she really was. And that changed everything. After her forged evidence collapsed in court, I expected her to retreat, maybe even reconsider her demands. But I should have known better. If anything, she came back more determined, changing her strategy entirely. The next hearing, her lawyer's tone was different, softer, almost sorrowful. Your Honor, he began, my client has endured tremendous emotional and financial strain during this marriage. She gave up her career to support her husband's ambitions. Now she's left with nothing, no steady income, no savings of her own. Without substantial spousal support, she will suffer unjust hardship. I felt my jaw tighten. It was a clever move. Instead of painting me as cruel, she was painting herself as helpless, leaning on pity where deceit had failed. Then she took the stand. Her voice quivered as she spoke, tears welling up in her eyes. I devoted everything to him. I believed in his dreams. I thought we'd build a future together. Now I'm left with nothing. Doesn't that count for something? For a moment, even I almost believed her. She was convincing, too convincing. And I could see the courtroom sway in her favor, heads nodding subtly as if her suffering was undeniable. But Collins was ready. When it was his turn, he stood and calmly presented financial records, transfers from my accounts to hers, proof of luxury purchases she had made in the last year, including designer handbags and expensive trips with her friends. He even revealed she had kept a separate account she never disclosed, money she had been saving quietly while still demanding support. The room shifted again. The sympathy drained, replaced by doubt. When she was asked directly about the hidden account, she stammered, trying to explain it away as a little savings fund she forgot to mention. But the damage was already done. The judge didn't rule immediately, but I could see it in his face. Her performance had cracked. As we walked out, she brushed past me without a word this time, her mask slipping more with every step. She had tried to play the victim, but now the court had seen the other side. The selfishness, the greed, the manipulation, and I knew the end game was approaching. By the time the next hearing arrived, the tension in the courtroom was electric. The judge had grown visibly impatient with her shifting stories, and for the first time, I felt like the scales were tipping in my favor. But just when I thought she might back down, she made her boldest move yet. Her lawyer rose and cleared his throat dramatically. Your Honor, My client wishes to submit new testimony, proof that Mr. Thompson has been hiding assets throughout this divorce. My stomach dropped. Hiding assets? He placed a stack of bank statements on the judge's desk, claiming I had secret accounts overseas, money I had supposedly stashed away to keep from her. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. My pulse spiked as I skimmed the documents. The numbers were huge, accounts I had never even heard of. I turned to Collins in disbelief. "These aren't mine," I whispered harshly. He nodded. "I know. Stay calm." When the judge looked at me, his expression was sharp. "Mr. Thompson, do you deny the existence of these accounts?" I stood, my voice steady despite the panic inside me. "Absolutely, Your Honor. Those accounts don't belong to me. I've never seen them before in my life." Collins requested time for a forensic review, and the judge agreed, but the damage was done. The seed of suspicion had been planted. As the session ended, I caught my wife's eyes. She wasn't smiling this time. She was glaring, cold, desperate, cornered. Days later, the forensic results came back. The accounts weren't mine. They were traced to a distant relative of hers, someone she had convinced to lend their records as proof. It was a reckless gamble, one that backfired spectacularly. I could see the next hearing. The judge's patience finally snapped. He leaned forward, his voice stern. "Mrs. Thompson, this court has been presented with fabricated evidence not once, but twice. Your credibility is in serious question." For the first time, she looked small. Her bravado was gone. The courtroom no longer saw her as a victim, but as a manipulator willing to lie and cheat to get everything. And in that moment, I knew the battle was almost over. The final hearing began with a silence so heavy it felt like the air itself was holding its breath. My wife sat across from me, shoulders tense, her lawyer looking less confident than ever. The judge shuffled papers slowly, deliberately, before speaking. "This case has dragged on longer than it should have," he said firmly. "And much of that delay has been caused by attempts to mislead this court." His eyes flicked toward her, sharp as a blade. Why pulse quickened. "This was it," he continued. "Twice now, Mrs. Thompson, you have presented fabricated or misleading evidence. This is a direct insult to the integrity of this court. I will not allow further games." She shifted uncomfortably, her face pale. For once, there was no dramatic speech, no tears to sway the room. The judge turned his gaze toward me. "Mr. Thompson, the property in question, the house, was purchased prior to this marriage. The retirement account was established years before. These will remain solely yours. As for joint savings, they will be divided equally, as is fair under the law." It was more than I dared to hope for. She had come for everything, but she was leaving with only a fraction. And regarding spousal support, the judge added, pausing for effect, "Given the evidence of hidden funds and the deliberate attempts to deceive this court, I see no justification for an award of ongoing payments." Petition denied. The sound of the gavel striking would echoed like thunder in my chest. Relief surged through me, a weight lifting after months of lies, accusations, and battles. Across the aisle, my wife's face was frozen in disbelief. Her lips parted as though the words couldn't reach her. She had gambled everything and lost. As the judge stood to leave, Collins leaned toward me, whispering, "It's over. You won." But I knew we weren't at the end just yet. Because what came after court, the fallout, the silence, and the rebuilding, would be the true final chapter. Walking out of the courthouse that day, the air felt lighter than it had in months. The sky was clear, the noise of traffic around me almost distant, as though the world itself was finally letting me breathe again. I had gone into that courtroom thinking I could lose everything: my home, my savings, even my dignity. But instead, the truth prevailed. The judge saw through her lies, her manipulations, her desperate attempts to paint herself as the victim. And when the gavel came down, it wasn't just a legal victory. It was justice. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the documents that proved it was finally over. No more hearings, no more forged evidence, no more whispers poisoning my name. For the first time since the divorce began, I felt like myself again, but it came with a lesson. Love can turn into war faster than we ever imagined. The person you once trusted most can become the one who tries hardest to destroy you. And sometimes, the only way to survive is to hold on to the truth, no matter how heavy the fight becomes. Looking back, I don't hate her. I pity her. Because in trying to take everything, she ended up with nothing but the consequences of her own choices that those of you who stayed with me until the end. Thank you. If there's one piece of advice I can give, it's this: never let lies define you. Stand tall, fight fair, and trust that truth has a way of coming out, even when the odds seem impossible. And if my story meant something to you, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and left a like. Your support helps me keep sharing stories like this, so none of us ever feel alone in battles like these.